As players build up their years of service and accrue bird rights, they become eligible to sign larger contracts. However, there is one exception to this rule, and that's the over-38 rule. Why was this rule put in place? This rule was put in place to close a loophole that teams could take advantage of to help them sign players that they couldn't actually afford. Teams would do this by signing these older players to contracts that would pay them well into their retirement. For example, if a team only had $10 million in cap space and was trying to sign a 36-year-old player that they knew was likely to retire in 3 years, instead of offering them a 3-year, $30 million contract, for example, they could instead add an additional year and make that a 4-year, $40 million contract. And that way overinflate how much that player was actually going to be making during their playing years. So they'd add that 4th year, even though they know that they're likely to not to fulfill that last year. So although it looks like a 4-year, $40 million contract with an average of about $10 million per year, the player and the team know that it's effectively a 3-year, $40 million deal, which is an average salary of around $13 million. That way, if this player's market value was above that $10 million in cap space that they could afford, this was a way that they could get around that and stay competitive in signing these older players. How does the over-38 rule close this loophole? The over-38 rule closes this loophole by trying to restrict the length of contracts that teams can give to aging players. Based on certain factors, which we'll get into in a second, the over-38 rule essentially defines the number of years that a team can sign a player to. And if they exceed that length, then the way that the contract is charged to the team's salary is adjusted. So this rule doesn't prevent teams from signing older players to longer contracts, it just removes the incentive to do so. Basically, the salary in each of the seasons that's in addition to what's allowed is classified as deferred compensation and is charged to the team's salary in the year it's earned instead of the year that it's paid. So in the previous example where a team was trying to sign a player to a 4-year, $40 million deal, since year 4 of that contract is essentially in violation of the over-38 rule, from a team's salary perspective, the salary in that final season, which was, let's just say $10 million, for example, would be spread over the first 3 seasons, raising those annual salary totals, and the team would only be able to offer that contract if they could fit the new adjusted salary value for year 1 into their available cap space. What problems could the over-38 rule create? This rule was originally known as the over-35 rule, and over time it eventually changed to become the over-36 rule, and then in the 2017 collective bargaining agreement, it finally was raised to become the over-38 rule, which it's known as today. The age limit seemed to have been raised to accommodate for the improved quality of play from aging players. However, in the most recent 2023 collective bargaining agreement, we saw that it was not raised again, so the over-38 rule is still set at the over-38 rule, which will be the case for the next several years. And the problem is, aging stars like LeBron James, Kevin Durant, and Steph Curry are showing that the point of decline and expected retirement seems like it's continuing to be pushed back even further. And since they didn't adjust the rule to account for that, we're likely to see a lot more players impacted by this rule than ever before. This coming offseason, for example, DeMar DeRozan, James Harden, Klay Thompson, and Jimmy Butler are just some of the players that could have to navigate around the rule. How long of a contract can an older player sign for? Contracts that extend beyond a player's 38th birthday may be subject to the over-38 rule. However, not all contracts will be. To determine if the over-38 rule applies, we need to look at 3 things. 1, the over-38 rule never applies to contracts that are 1 year, 2 year, or 3 years in length. The over-38 rule only applies to certain contracts that are 4 years or 5 years in length. This applies to brand new contracts, extensions, or renegotiations. 2, the contract length that a player may sign for is determined by 2 factors. 1 is the player's age at the time that they're signing their contract. And we'll get into in a minute how you determine a player's age for the purposes of the over-38 rule. And 2, is that player signing a contract as a free agent using full bird rights or not? If they're signing a contract as a free agent with full bird rights, in certain cases, they get a little bit of additional leeway and flexibility. And for the purposes of the over-38 rule, if they're executing a sign-in trade, then they are not considered to be a free agent full bird. And 3, we need to understand how is a player's age determined for the purposes of the over-38 rule, because sometimes it's not as straightforward as what is their age on the day that they sign the contract. An easy way to think this through is that during the season that that player signs their contract extension or renegotiation, you want to look at how old are they going to be on October 1st of that season. So if they signed their contract on July the 15th, how old will they be on October the 1st? You future date it. That's the age you're going to use. And if they sign an extension on January the 15th, then you're going to backdate it. How old were they on October the 1st? So for example, if a player like DeMar DeRozan goes ahead and signs an extension, let's say in March of 2024, we don't look at his age at that time when he signs that extension. Instead, we backdate it to how old was he on October 1st of that season? And we use that age instead. And now that we have a better understanding of how age is determined, we can now use this chart. On this chart, what you'll see here is it shows the contract lengths that are exempt from the over 38 rule. Using this chart, what you do is you use the row that corresponds to the player's age as of October 1st of the season that they're signing their contract or their extension. This chart shows, depending on their age, what length of contract the player can be signed to that would be exempt from the over 38 rule and avoid that deferred compensation penalty. Teams can essentially freely sign players to these lengths of contracts with no repercussions. So for example, if a player that's considered to be 34 years old signs a contract or an extension, regardless if they're a free agent full bird or any other scenario, that contract can be 4 years in length. If a player is 35 or 36 years old, as you can see on the second and the third rows, well, if they're a free agent and signing with full bird rights, they can sign a contract that's an additional year longer. It can be 4 years. However, under all other scenarios, that contract length can only be 3 years. And then if that player is 37 years or older, regardless of if they're a free agent full bird or any other scenario, that contract can only be 3 years in length. As you can tell, when a player is 34, everything is the same, whether or not they're a free agent full bird or not. And when they're 37 years old or older, everything is the same. They can sign a 3-year contract, regardless if they're a free agent full bird or not. Now, there is one minor exception to be aware of when determining a player's age for the purposes of the over 38 rule, but it really only applies in rare cases where the player's birthday is during the first week of July. Basically, if the player's birthday is during the July moratorium, which is July the 1st to the 6th, and they sign a contract, an extension, or renegotiation within 5 days after the July moratorium, so by the end of July the 11th, instead of using their age as of October the 1st, in this unique case, their age is actually backdated to how old they were on June the 30th, the day before the moratorium began. For all other scenarios, when the player's birthday is not during the first week of July and they sign a contract, an extension, or renegotiation, their age is just considered to be how old they will be on October 1st of that season. So let's look at a few examples. One, going back to DeMar DeRozan, who is currently extension eligible. To determine how long an extension he could sign, we find out how old was he on October the 1st of this season. He was 34 years old at that time, so if he were to sign an extension this season, we use row 1. Since he wouldn't be signing as a free agent, it would fall under the other column. Therefore, he would be able to sign a 4-year contract, which would be the current 23-24 season, which is the final remaining season on his contract, plus 3 additional seasons without that contract being subject to the over 38 rule. Now, if DeRozan wanted to sign a new contract as a free agent this offseason, let's say in July while he's still 34, for the purposes of the over 38 rule, we don't care about his current age. We instead look at how old will he be on October the 1st. And in his case, since his birthday is August the 7th, he'd actually be viewed as 35 years old. If he wanted to sign a contract that wasn't subject to the over 38 rule, he'd be able to re-sign as a free agent using full bird rights for up to 4 years. Or he can sign a deal with a brand new team, but that would be limited to being only 3 years in length. James Harden, he's in the exact same situation as DeRozan, except he's not currently extension eligible. So his only option will be to sign a new contract as a free agent in the 2024 offseason. If he re-signs with the Clippers, who currently have his full bird rights, James Harden will be limited to signing a 4-year deal with them. But if he wants to sign with a new team, he's going to be limited to signing only a 3-year deal. Which recent contracts were signed that worked around the over 38 rule? As mentioned earlier, at the age of 36, we saw Chris Paul sign a 4-year contract with the Phoenix Suns in 2021. This was the max allowable contract in terms of years that he could have signed with them. If he signed with any other team while he was a free agent that summer, he would have only been able to sign for 3 years. Another example was in 2020. At the age of 35, LeBron James signed an extension with the Lakers that added 2 additional seasons to a deal that had just 1 year left. Since he was signing an extension and not as a free agent with full bird rights, the 3-year deal was the longest contract that he was able to sign at that time. And we saw LeBron do the exact same thing again in 2022 when he signed another 3-year extension at 37 years of age. How do you calculate the salary adjustment from a cap hit perspective? Any additional years given to a player beyond what's allowed by the over-38 rule are classified as 0 years. From a team salary perspective, the salary in a 0 year is considered to be $0, and that salary is actually re-weighted across all the approved years. To explain how this would work, I'm going to use Mike Conley as an example. In this example, we'll be looking at Mike Conley signing a hypothetical 5-year contract with the Minnesota Timberwolves this offseason. So first, we need to determine 2 things. 1, what's his age for the purposes of the over-38 rule? And 2, what's the maximum length of contract he's allowed to sign without triggering the over-38 rule? So Mike Conley will be 36 years of age heading into the offseason. He'll be turning 37 on October the 11th, and since that is after October the 1st, for the purposes of the over-38 rule, he'll be considered to be 36 years old. Mike Conley will also be considered to be a free agent with full bird rights if he's re-signing a contract with Minnesota, which in this example, he will be doing. Based on the over-38 rule chart, Mike Conley will be allowed to sign a 4-year contract with Minnesota without it being impacted by the over-38 rule. But for the purposes of this example, we're going to assume that Mike Conley is re-signing with Minnesota on a 5-year deal, meaning year 5 will be classified as a 0 year since it's above the allowable length. So now let's look at how Mike Conley's contract cap hits will change based on the fact that he has a 0 year in his contract. Looking at this graphic, we can see that Mike Conley will be signing a 5-year, $126 million contract. The salary starts at $30 million next season, which would be the 24-25 season, and his age for the purposes of the over-38 rule will be classified as 36 years of age. His contract starts at $30 million and works its way down to $20.4 million. However, year 5 is considered to be a 0 year. So for a team's salary perspective, we need to adjust the cap hits in years 1 to 4 and remove the cap hit on year 5. That $20.4 million is then redistributed across the first 4 years. The way you determine the percentages is you take the total salary for only the first 4 years, and that works out to be $105.6 million. And you determine the weight of the salary being paid in each of those years. So $30 million is his salary in year 1, which works out to be 28.4% of that $105.6 million. And so you take 28.4% of his salary in year 5, which works out to be just under $5.8 million. And that amount is added to his salary, which comes out to a cap hit of about $35.8 million. And then so on and so forth in years 2, 3, and 4. The max allowable salary for Mike Conley in year 1 is 35% of the salary cap, which is projected to be about $49.7 million. So year 1, even after the reallocation, still fits under the allowable salary. Now let's look at year 2. Year 2 is pretty straightforward. Everything is kept the exact same. There's no additional adjustments because you don't make an adjustment to an over-38 contract until you are 2 years before the first 0 year. So all the cap hits are the same. On July 1st, 2026, Mike Conley enters the 3rd year of his contract. This is now 2 years before the first 0 year. So now you make an adjustment. That $20.4 million is now factored in. So what you do is you take the remaining salary for years 3, 4, and 5, which would be $68.4 million, and you simply average them out. So the cap hit for each year, year 3, year 4, and year 5, would be $22.8 million for each year. The following season, on July 1st, 2027, which would be year 4 of the contract, you then do the same formula. You take the remaining salary, which is $43.2 million, and you average it out between year 4 and year 5. So the cap hit would be $21.6 million. What you'll notice is in year 3 and in year 4, the cap hit is actually a little bit less than Mike Conley's actual salary. And then finally, on July 1st, 2028, Mike Conley would be entering his final season. He'd be paid $20.4 million, and the cap hit would be exactly what he's paid, $20.4 million. And that in a nutshell is everything you need to know about the over-38 rule. If you like the content, hit subscribe and support the channel.